What you really need to plan for is a lot of repetition. It takes the same message over and over again to instill confidence in the acquired team that there's security in their future in order to secure the buy-in and, more importantly, their focus. Welcome back to Inorganic. My name is Christian Hasselt. I'm your host. Today is episode 10. I'm so excited. It's my first double-digit milestone. I've been on a little break, so pardon taking a week off. I'm back this week, and in this episode, we are going to shift gears and talk about integration. Let's say that you have the target in mind, you've agreed on economic terms, you've met with the CEO multiple times, you've gotten together with the leadership team, everyone's aligned. This is the most exciting acquisition coming together of two companies that you could imagine. What could possibly go wrong? Everything can go wrong. And so in this episode, what we're going to do is talk about how to beat the odds. 90% of acquisitions fail to meet the goals that were set by the leadership team for the acquisition because the post-merger integration plan, or sometimes the integration plan, it's just not really well thought out or executed. And when you are a company that is, under 300 people, it's the first acquisition you've done, there's so much on the table. This is the first time that the board's given you permission to do M&A. It's the first acquisition for a CEO. Of course, there's going to be bumps along the road, but the better you do on the first one, the more opportunity you're going to have for the next, if there's going to be a next. And so in this episode, what we're going to do is talk about what it looks like to get it right. What's sort of the minimum viable concept, knowing that resources are limited. You don't have an integration team of 10. You probably have an integration team of 2 or 3. And what are kind of the right steps and things to be thinking about. My guest on today's episode is Mohammed Baloch, and he has a fantastic background in M&A. Mohammed, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hi, Christian. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to be talking about integration with you today.
Awesome. Maybe if you could just start with a little bit about your background and where you are today.
Sure. I'll start with where I'm at today. I'm at Gainsight, a B2B SaaS company. We're part of the Vista Equity portfolio, and I lead our M&A integration function for Gainsight. It's been a fun ride. We've done 2 deals since I've been there, and looking forward to the exciting things we're thinking about next. But prior to joining Gainsight, I've been doing integration work for, close to 15 years now. I was at VMware immediately prior to Gainsight, where we were fairly acquisitive. I think we did close to 9-10 deals in my 2 years there. And then prior to that, I was in management consulting, primarily focused on M&A integration work for close to 6-7 years in New York City. So working with a number of industries across the board. And yeah, it's led me to have a pretty good background in this topic, and it's near and dear to my heart. So
awesome. I bet Nick would like it if you just told us what Gainsight did. Little plug for the company.
We make customer success software. I'm sure Nick would love to hear this, but yes, we make customer success software for other B2B SaaS software vendors to ensure your customers are using your software, using and extracting the most value out of it, making sure they're successful with your products. That's what we do at Gainsight.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for coming on the pod. Let's get started. I'd like to frame it up for our audience. But the goal of this conversation is, let's say you're roughly a company size of, 500 to 1,000, and you're acquiring a company of anywhere between 10 and 100 people. If you're going to do that kind of an acquisition, you might say, the success criteria is a cross-sell, upsell metric. It might be market expansion, or it could be being able to target a new persona. There's going to be business criteria underlying, but the number one thing that you need to be thinking about, whether it's 10 people or 100 people, is how am I going to successfully bring together these two teams and achieve the goals that we define. The economic goals are one thing, but the thing that frequently gets in the way of success is the people integration and the plan to achieve the goals with the people, the acquired and the acquiring team coming together in the right way. And so what I wanted to do in this episode was have Mohammed kind of walk us through a framework for how to think about it, knowing that you probably don't have much of an integration team, or you don't have anybody on the team right now who's experienced at integration. There's just not a corporate development function that might exist inside of an HP or Google. So what should that look like? So I think the other setting up criteria is everything we're talking about in this episode is what we call pre-close. So everything from the signing of the letter intent, that is we are going to do this deal, through the confirmatory diligence pay, everything from the signing of the letter of intent up to the close date, which is the confirmatory diligence process. This is the scope of this discussion. And that technical detail is all, to just be clear, there's a lot of other things to discuss. We're going to just frame it there to make this consumable for our audience. So the first question I have, Mohammed, is, okay, you know that this setup is a smaller SaaS company. Who are the players at the acquirer that need to be at the table to run the integration process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you may or may not have a corp dev function. So if you do, your corp dev lead should definitely be involved. Obviously, there's going to be an executive sponsor, someone within product, probably within product, who is saying, we need to go do this deal. So that person is going to be integral to setting the deal thesis, the strategy of why we're doing this, and how this will be a good long-term play for us. So those two, I think, would be key players. You're obviously going to have your acquiring company's leadership team involved. They're all going to need to be on board. There's going to need to be buy-in before you go sign an LOI, hopefully. And then from the acquired company, or we'll call them target co going forward, it's generally going to be a smaller subset. Again, this is pre-close, so we're not publicly announcing this. There might be some sensitivities with people and headcount. So you're generally going to see the leadership team, or even a subset of the leadership team from the acquired company, being involved at this stage, from LOI to close and the planning and diligence phase.
It's a great point you raised. Number one is, it's still early. This is non-public. Mm-hmm. Even if you think that this is a small company, small deal, you still need to keep the lid tight. You do not, especially if this is an opportunity that you've sourced that's proprietary, where there's not a banker run process, you don't want it to get out to the market this is happening. Number two is the person who needs to own this, the executive sponsor, generally speaking, needs to be the chief product officer or the CEO, needs to be someone on the business or product side. And then the deal person can either, if you have a corp dev person, they should run it, but frequently that person doesn't exist. And so I've spoken about this in other episodes. Someone needs to sort of own it and be the project leader internally. But generally speaking, you need to ring fence it on both sides. I think the other thing that we didn't quite talk about that is also important is you need to be very proactive about communicating to the acquired that they need to ring fence, and like, who are they bringing to the table? So who is usually on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the CEO of the acquired company will be involved. I've seen it's usually your go-to-market function, so your sales lead, your marketing lead, your customer success leads, and then maybe one or two folks from your back office, so your CFO, and if there's a chief people or HR officer. Those are probably the 5 or 6 folks we've typically seen involved with deals of this size that would be brought under the tent from the acquired company at this stage.
The way to think about that is on the acquirer side, any leader who is going to be gold on the success criteria of the acquisition needs to be at the table and read in, and they need to have a counterpart on the acquiring side. It may not always be the case that it's one-to-one, but you want to make sure that the people that own the success are read in fairly early, even if it requires reading in someone who may not be an SVP or VP. You might have to bring in a senior director. As long as you trust them, it's best off to have them there, because the last thing you want to do is drop some news on them on day one and find out that they aren't behind it or don't see the vision. You need to part of the process is bringing everyone together to align them on the goals and the plan.
Yep.
In this scenario, there's like roles to play. And there's one thing is who are the people, but the other thing is the roles to play. And so one of the things is deal needs an integration lead. How should a company like this think about, who should really play the integration lead?
Yeah, that's a tough one. If the company doesn't have a dedicated resource, you need to find someone within your organization who's got a skill set that I guess the best way to put it of a utility player, so they can think very strategically and remember the reasons why we're doing this deal, how it's going to make 1 + 1 = 3. But they also need to have a mindset of operations and execution and program and project management. And so someone that can see the 50,000-foot view, but also get in the weeds and have the 5-inch view and be able to speak to both. So, translate what the operation that execution teams are going through to an executive team and vice versa. So if you've got someone like that, a strategic operator within your company, depending on what function they sit in, that's probably the person you want to tap on the shoulder to lead something like this. They need to be well networked. They need to be someone who knows how your business operates. And ultimately, you want someone that can just go get things done. It's tough if you don't have someone dedicated to that role, but I think that's the skill set and the background you want to be looking for. Yeah, if you don't have an integration lead dedicated.
Yeah, right. So the qualities are, number one, well networked within the company, good rapport with all of the teams, understands the business really well. I think project management skills is a pretty critical criteria. They have to be very organized and have clearly demonstrated project management skills. You don't have project management skills, it's not going to work.
Agreed. Yep.
One of the ways that I've seen companies that don't have dedicated integration in-house is they outsource an integration advisor. Have you done that before in your experience, or have you seen how that works well?
I've been the integration advisor in my previous roles. I haven't done it here at Gainsight. We've got me, so not necessary, but sure, there are different flavors to it. I mean, the purposes of this discussion, you're probably not going to go get the big multinational consulting firms to be brought in. Those are probably cost prohibitive and just not necessary for a deal of this size that we're talking about. But there are several niche players in the market these days. An independent contractor certainly could play the role here. But I think it's useful if this, again, in the scenario we're talking about, this is your first deal as a company, you don't have a dedicated integration advisor, in-house integration advisor. I think it's not a bad idea to bring someone in who's done this before, who can help you at least put together a framework and a foundation that you can build on for future deals. So I think that's not a bad idea for companies that are doing this for maybe their first or second time.
I think it's not optional. You need a playbook.
Sure.
I agree with you. You shouldn't use a big, expensive firm. There are boutique firms that do it. They're also into a lot of independents. And usually your investors will know or have contacts to those independents. I think one of the challenges with the independents is knowing kind of what are the right qualities or what's the right playbook. And not all playbooks are equal. What are the 2 or 3 things that a company should be looking for in a partner who is helping guide the integration process?
I think you want someone that's not going to be super dogmatic. I think in M&A integration, there are going to be consistent themes and consistent things you need to do, but every integration, every deal is unique. Everything needs to be bespoke and tailored to the specific goals and situations of that deal. So I think flexibility and being able to tailor different approaches to your specific deal is going to be critical. And in my mind, maybe the most important thing is you need to be flexible in your approach to how a deal is going to be integrated. So yeah, I think that's probably top of mind for me. I certainly want someone that's done this before, ideally in the space that you're working in. So I think that would also be useful when you're going to market and trying to select a vendor to come in and help you with some of this stuff.
The way I've experienced it is they are in essence a coach with a playbook, and they are able to practically balance where they need to lean in and where they can let the company drive, autopilot. And there's a real practical balance between the two.
Yep.
I think the important thing for CEOs to be thinking about is do not just talk to one and go with them. You should force the company to look at least 2 or 3 people to get a sense of personality, style, and playbook. There's a lot of copy and paste playbooks out there, and that's totally fine. You should look at the playbook that feels right for you. The one thing that I've seen that can get messy is You're like, oh, I met all these people, all their playbooks that look the same. I'll just take their playbook. I don't need to hire them. Like the playbook is a template, but
Yeah.
it is actually the creative art of running the integration process and dealing with a lot of unexpected things. That is actually what you're paying for. That is the hard work. It's not heir apparent until the problems come up. For example, in an acquisition I worked on, we had a real clear template and playbook, but people are just not familiar with the process. And so when things get uncomfortable, when there are tough decisions to make, people say, oh, the process isn't working. No, it is working. You should have points of discomfort in the process because there are tough decisions to make. That's a real thing. It's not all like theater and super easy.
It's a great point. I think people hear the word playbook and they think of it as a panacea, that it's going to just be the step-by-step way we're going to get a company integrated and make it successful, and we're going to hit all our go-to-market targets and everyone's going to be happy. And that's a fallacy. I mean, to your point, it's a guide, it's a framework, it's an operating model to work within, but integrations are uncomfortable inherently by nature. There's going to be bumps along the road, and playbooks just don't account for that. That's where you need a real person on the ground, that's able to navigate those choppy waters that you're inevitably going to run into.
So let's switch gears kind of into the process itself. The thing we're aligning around is the North Star. The North Star states, what does success look like for this deal? Who defines the North Star?
That's your executive sponsor, I think. Your person, whether that's your CEO, your product leader, whoever that is at the acquiring company, was saying, we need to go buy X, Y, and Z company for this reason. That is who's defining who your success criteria is.
And is it your experience that the North Star is best developed by a fairly small group of people, like a couple, right? Like,
sure.
The CEOs together, the CEO and maybe the board just sort of say, here's the criteria for success. We are going to, frequently it's even before the LOI is drafted. We model that we will cross-sell X.
Yep.
We will expand into Europe and gain X, Y, or Z market share. We will accelerate roadmap by acquiring this product. Like, you've modeled it already, so it is pretty much defined, but this is the modeling's been done by a team, but that North Star criteria just really needs to be defined very clearly, because it provides a framework by which the rest of the team can now say, okay, here's what we need to go do. If this is going to be true, then this is what needs to happen.
That's right. I think before you worry about who else to bring in, what functions, what people need to be involved in your integration planning, you need to have a clearly defined deal thesis. Why are we doing this deal? It needs to be, again, just as crystal clear as possible. And then you need to communicate that to everyone that is being brought in under the tent. Here's what we're doing. Here's why. Now help us go figure out how to go get that done. So I think if you don't have that, it makes your integration planning hard. It will inevitably erode whatever kind of gains you're potentially going to have. And it just makes the process clunky. So from the outset, you got to have that defined. That North Star is a great word. And then everyone's just aligned. There's no ambiguity. You know what you're marching towards, and then you go get it done.
So let's make this real for our audience. Let's say that is a cross-sell thesis. The acquired company, the acquiring company is going to cross-sell the acquired's product into the acquirer's base. Number one thing that needs to happen is enablement.
Yep. Enablement for both, I guess, maybe even taking a step back, who's coming over, who's going to sell what, and then how do we enable them? Are the acquired company sellers going to sell the acquiring company's products and vice versa? Regardless, it's a new product. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of nuance in just how you speak to the customers. What's the better together story? How do these products actually work together, whether that's on day one or what the roadmap is going to be 6 months down the road to make this a unique and compelling product for you to buy. All of that has to be defined. All of that has to be thought out. And then all of that has to be deployed and enabled for your sales teams to go out and start hitting their targets and the deal targets as well. So
here's the good intent view of the CEO, the executive leadership. I've got a team of 20. We're putting these two companies together. I got a number to hit this quarter. I'm trying to grow this company X% year over year. I'm doing this acquisition for this reason, but I don't want to distract my entire team. So I'm going to create a tiger team. And it's going to be my 2 or 3 favorite reps on my side and the 2 or 3 reps on their side that I think know what they're doing. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it this way. This happens. This is not an unusual sort of debate, because if you have 20 sales reps are inherently distractible. They are inherently distractible. They love new shiny objects. And the minute you show them something, they say, show me for it. Let me take a test drive. And I want to spend the next 2 hours talking about like what it is and what it's not, regardless of enablement we put in front of them. So it's a challenge. So like, I think the question I would have is like, if you're having that debate internally, what is the right sort of way to navigate? Like ultimately, we serve at the pleasure of our CEO and the board, and so we're there to execute on what they want. So what's the things to be thinking about when you're thinking about a tiger team versus everybody enabled format?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think the tiger team approach is the right way to do it. To your point, there's a lot of a distraction factor just in general when you acquire a company. The market's distracted, your employees are distracted, certainly your sales teams are distracted. It's easy to lose, take your eye off the ball. And so I think the tiger team, it's a great concept. It's a great way to almost a phased approach or a ramp approach. Your tiger team comes in, they're the ones focused on the cross-sell motion, while simultaneously your broader sales organization, your broader sellers are allowed to focus on their core targets and selling your core products. But in the background, you need to be working on that enablement we've talked about, and clearly define rules of engagement and how to start bringing them in when that makes sense. And ultimately, you shift from a tiger team to this is just now your entire sales team's job to go sell and make the cross sell happen.
I think the other rationale behind doing that, to be honest, is the thesis is a thesis. There's a lot of things you don't know, that you need to sort of test and learn, and testing and learning with a tiger team is better than having a full team. I mean, in some cases you might say, look, this is a clear plug and play. It makes perfect sense how this is going to work. Our assumptions are sound. We have all the reasons to believe they're sound.
Yep.
But that's very infrequently the case, especially if the acquirers, especially if there's a scenario where the product that you're selling in the cross sell, it previously went to let's say it was like a VP sales persona, and now you're going to like a VP supply chain persona. You don't know exactly what will come up in the sales process, an example. So we talked about cross sell. Another thing that is similar but definitely different is just bringing a new SKU into the bag of the sellers for net new logo. This is a product that is a land product that anybody can sell. Usually the case is the acquired is already in the market. There's a lot of overlap. So this is just a natural, we're going to go sell this. Think about it this way. We're going to go target a new SAM, a new category of customer with a product we've successfully sold somewhere else. So let's say you're the acquirer has typically been selling into brands that are within anything that's under a rooftop of a Home Depot. And now we're going to go sell the same kind of product to a customer that's anything under the rooftop of a Walmart. The sales motion is probably the same, but the buyer is slightly different problems categorically speaking. It's probably not terribly different from saying the customer success software that Gainsight is offering has typically been offered to SaaS companies, but what about selling it to on-premise companies? What are the things that you need to test and learn on?
I mean, I think that goes back to your theory or the concept of a tiger team. Maybe that's where I've seen it with co-selling motion. So an acquirer, a salesperson from the acquired company is partnering with the acquirer salesperson. So they're going into these conversations with customers, making sure that the right questions are being asked, that the right outcomes are being envisioned, and that it's just a more intelligent, greater chance of success with your sales cycles.
Yeah.
Rules of engagement as well. I think that comes into play there. I've also seen it done where you don't have your core sales team touch the product for a quarter or two, and you just leave it to the acquired company's sales team to go finish out their targets, or you're doing the enablement in the background, you're building a pipeline in the background, you're letting things stabilize, immediately post acquisition. So I think there are different flavors and different ways to do it. It just depends on how aggressive and quickly your targets are and how quickly you need to achieve them. But yeah, there's not a one size fit all approach to this.
Yeah, I think the important thing is like you should be open to experimentation and the assumption that a thesis you may have about like how a particular GTM process will work may not play out. So what does plan B look like? Part of the integration plan is we're going to try this. If this doesn't work, we're going to try that. We're just clear on how we're going to shift gears together. Why don't we shift gears and talk a little bit about people? I think we were talking at the top about the importance of just people and success and people integration together.
Yep.
In the pre-close phase, like what are the things that leadership should be doing to help ensure the integration success of the people, like the actual culture and integration?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to clearly define, obviously there are deal parameters, who's coming over, who's not, who's going to be a long-term resource. Perhaps you'll have some transition resources. Unfortunately, as we all know, M&A, occasionally there are resources that are made redundant. That all needs to be very clear from the outset, pre-close. There also needs to be a very, very crisp and clear communication plan. If you think about an acquired company, most of the folks aren't going to be brought under the tent, and then one morning the CEO calls in all hands and says, surprise, we've been acquired. And that just is going to facilitate a lot of unknown and anxieties and just a lot of consternation amongst a team like that. And so having a clearly defined communication plan from day one is got to be your number one priority for people. Is just, we have to communicate early, we have to communicate often, and we have to be crisp and aligned in our messaging. So I think that's very, very important. And then I'm a big fan of leadership, acquiring companies leadership, going on site, going to be felt in person and saying, y'all are now a important part of our future company's growth together. I am here answering all the questions that need to be answered, having town hall forums, things of that nature. But I just think that there's, in our post-COVID Zoom world, there's just so much to be said about seeing leadership on site, in person. It just makes it tangible. And I think that just immediately starts to get the acquired company's mindset of, we are important, we are going to be a big part of this, and the buy-in just starts immediately. So I think those are two pretty important things from the outset that need to be planned for well in advance of the deal actually closing.
Yeah. I think what people miss in people integration planning is you can plan the best like day one kickoff event. You can plan for you can have a FAQ document that's 10 pages with all the possible questions. What you really need to plan for is a lot of repetition, because it takes a lot of the same message over and over again to instill confidence in the acquired team that their security in their future. You can tell them on day one, this is going to be great. We're together. We don't have any plans to do anything change in workforce. And they still the next morning will say, yeah, but I'm just not sure about it. And
Sure.
If people success and people retention is a critical metric, you have to double and triple down on that retention metric, going so far as to doing if it's not monthly surveys, pulse surveys on the health of the acquired team. How are they feeling? What are they thinking? What are their questions? It has to be, you have to plan what I'm saying is you have to plan for a lot of interaction in order to secure the buy-in, and more importantly, their focus.
100%.
People lose focus when they get concerned about their job security, and that can impact your realizing your North Star KPIs.
Agreed, 100%. I think for your existing people managers, if the acquired company's employees will now report into your existing leadership structure, that should be part of their mandate, their goals for the year, is to ensure retention as much as possible. Obviously, at the end of the day, some folks will leave, and there's nothing you can do about that. But a very high touch model, almost over communicate, over index on making sure that the acquired company's teammates are feeling secure, or at least having their questions answered. You're removing ambiguity. I think that's critically important for at least, and it needs to go on for longer than you probably think. I'd say at least 2 quarters,
Yeah.
to make sure that folks are feeling how they should be, and that you're minimizing any kind of attrition or flight risks.
One of the plays that I've heard about, and I'd love your opinion on it, is that actually serves a greater purpose, is having the acquired people interview for their job. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've candidly never heard of that concept before, but I like that. That way they're able to have the discussion with who's potentially going to be their, or maybe already is their now future people manager, just understanding what's expected of them, what the culture is like, who they're going to be working with, what the team is like. I think that's a great way to bring those folks in and immediately have them have a very quick and better understanding of what they're stepping into with this now new we'll call it, going forward.
Yeah, I talked with Rob Gonzalez about this in another episode, and we debated it a little bit. And, the merits for it actually sounds harsh, like having an acquired employee interview for the job they already have. But what are the goals that you're solving for? Number one is culture fit. The acquired company's culture is the culture that is going to reign. And you want to make sure that the employee is excited about that culture, it's going to work for them, and that employee is going to fit in the critical role that they're going to play in the integration. The secondary objective is to give the employee an opportunity to ask the tough questions and to meet their potential new boss. You want to meet this person and have security. This is someone you want to work with.
Yep.
I've seen employees in these scenarios in prior times say, I don't want to be a part of this ship. I just sort of like to phase out. And that's great. It's much better to do that. It's much better to have the conversation than to leave it unsaid. I'm getting more and more of a fan of that. It may not be possible to scale beyond a certain number of people. There's, ways you have to do it depending on the size on both sides. But I mean, if you go back and think about what we're talking about here, Mohammed, it's if you're acquiring under 100 people, 50, 60, 75, your retention metrics need to be 85 to 90%, right? And it's a very slippery slope to have, one employee or one group of employees not feel like aligned with what is happening or not feel the culture. And they can have ripple effects on the rest of the team. And so what are the other ways that you can counteract that and make sure that you're going to have the right kind of post-merger, culture and excitement on both sides?
Yeah. And then you think of teams of that size, they're probably all working together. Everyone knows everyone else. The larger you get, obviously it's harder to know everyone. So it's certainly important to make sure that just consistently folks are feeling as good as they can be about recently being acquired. But what I've seen work well, I think we do it great at Gainsight, is just a really formal, phased onboarding approach. So these folks coming in are they're like new hires, obviously. So, but there's just a very detailed onboarding, month-long onboarding, just to make sure that they are, again, feeling comfortable, having all their questions answered, maybe some company-wide events where leadership's, again, on site out at the acquired company's office, building rapport. I think simple things like changing email domains very quickly or getting your Slack integrated so that you're not in two systems sounds overly basic and simplistic, but 2 years down the road, if you're still on a legacy email domain or a different chat program, you're not really integrated and you're not really one team. And so things like that, just where in the background, everyone can see that this truly is going to be one team, one company.
Look, I think the point that you're getting towards, and I think we should say it explicitly, is look, make sure your chief people officer or your head of people is an integral part of the process.
Yes.
If they're experienced and they know what they're doing, they're going to know the right playbook. And one of the things, like, it was a great example. If the two teams are on two different Slacks, the upheaval will come very quickly.
Sure. Sure.
They have one, why can't we be there? We don't know what anybody's talking about. No one can communicate. Like those are super basic things that people sometimes deprioritize, but they actually are important things. Maybe parting advice, since we're getting to the bottom, like what's your parting advice to a CEO who's considering an acquisition?
Yeah, I think parting advice is don't wait. I don't want to say it's easy to go acquire a company. It's not easy to go find the right company to acquire, but don't skimp on the integration and don't wait. As soon as that LOI is signed, if not sooner, if you've got a person in mind who can be your integration lead, keep them involved at least at a high level of what's happening and what you're thinking of, so that this person can already start to formulate a plan and think of how to get it done. But my just number one advice is don't wait. Start the integration planning as soon as you sign that LOI.
Lean
into it for sure.
And with that, I want to thank you, Mohammed, for joining me on the pod. Really appreciated your insights. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to doing this again sometime.
Cool. And on behalf of Theo and myself, thanks for joining us for another episode of Inorganic. If you enjoyed the discussion, please like, subscribe, join our podcast wherever you find us, and tell a friend about it. We're still growing the audience and really appreciate your helping get the word out. Until next time, take care.